Let's have a real conversation about that one thing we all keep chasing, happiness. It's kind of wild when you think about it. Everyone wants it, everyone's searching for it, and there's even a massive industry built around selling us the idea of how to get it. But here's the truth. Happiness, isn't some permanent state you achieve once and then keep forever. It's not like a formula where you just do X plus Y and suddenly get Z, and boom, you're happy for the rest of your life. Happiness doesn't work like money in a savings account, where you can stash it away and draw from it whenever you want. And it doesn't really depend on how big your bank balance is, what car you drive, or whether your house looks like it belongs in a magazine. Sure, those things can feel nice, but they don't necessarily equal happiness. So here's the big question. How does happiness actually work? I'll be honest with you, I've been chasing happiness for years. Like many people, I went through different phases trying to figure out what really makes me happy. And man, I tried a lot. The first thing that gave me that big rush of happiness was alcohol. Maybe you can relate. The buzz, the lightness, the carefree vibe, it feels amazing, at least in the moment. But here's the kicker, it never lasts. The happiness inside that glass doesn't stick around. For a few hours, it feels like life is amazing, but then the next day hits, and it can be absolutely brutal. The hangover, the regret, the empty feeling, it made me realize that this wasn't the kind of happiness I was really searching for. So I kept looking. Next up was romantic love. Being in love is one of the most incredible highs any human can experience. You know the feeling, the butterflies, the excitement, the way the whole world seems brighter and softer. Honestly, it's one of the best things life has to offer. But here's the catch. It's also fragile. Relationships don't always last. I've felt that too when love turns sour, when romance turns into arguments, distance, or even hate. The highest of highs can crash into the lowest of lows. And when that happens, the happiness you thought would last forever suddenly disappears. The same thing happened with food, buying the newest gadgets, or going on vacations. Don't get me wrong, these things are fun. They bring joy. But again, they don't last. You get the new phone or the gaming console, and for a while it feels amazing. You book a dream vacation, and you're on top of the world. But once the trip is over, or the gadget becomes just another item on the shelf, that feeling of happiness fades. And this isn't just personal experience, science backs it up. Back in 1978, researchers Brickman Coates and Janoff Bowman ran a fascinating study to find out if happiness is relative. They studied 3 groups: lottery winners, people who became paralyzed from accidents, and a control group of regular people. Now, you'd expect the lottery winners to be way happier than everyone else, right? And you'd assume accident victims would be much less happy than anyone else. But here's what they found. After about a year, the average happiness levels of the lottery winners and the control group were basically the same. In fact, the lottery winners weren't dramatically happier. And yes, the accident victims were a little less happy, but not by as much as you'd think. So what does that tell us? It shows us that happiness is relative. A lottery winner might be over the moon when they first hear they've won, and an accident victim might be devastated at the news of losing their ability to walk. But over time, their happiness levels gradually move back toward a similar baseline. Our minds adapt both to the good and the bad. Of course, if you asked most people whether they'd rather win the lottery or lose a limb, the answer is obvious. The lottery seems like the better option because of all the pleasures money can buy. And sure, pleasure is great, but pleasure is not the same thing as happiness. So then what is happiness? Really? Let us rewind a couple thousand years to look at one of the greatest happiness seekers in history, Prince Siddhartha Gautama, who later became known as Buddha. Here was a man who had everything: unbelievable wealth, luxury, comfort, and yet, despite all of it, he was deeply dissatisfied. So he left his palaced life to see the real world, and he was struck by all the suffering people went through. His first idea was, maybe happiness can be found by rejecting pleasure completely. So he went to the other extreme, practicing asceticism. He starved himself, sometimes eating just a single grain of rice a day. He pushed his body to endure all kinds of pain. But after years of this, he realized this wasn't the answer either. Eventually, through meditation, he discovered what he called the middle way. Not indulgence, not self-torture, but balance. And under the Bodhi tree, he found enlightenment. The suffering and dissatisfaction he had carried for so long transformed into a lasting sense of peace and bliss. The lesson here: throwing yourself into endless pleasure doesn't bring happiness, but neither does immersing yourself in pain. Happiness sneaks up when you stop chasing it so desperately and learn to simply be in the moment. Think about water for a second. No matter how much you shake it or stir it, eventually, it settles back into stillness. Happiness works the same way. Beneath all the highs and lows, there's a natural state of calm, and it's in that calmness where you'll find true bliss. Now, does that mean we all need to sit under a tree meditating for hours every day to find happiness? Not at all. What it really means is that we need to stop obsessing over trying to be happy, and instead focus on doing things that connect us to the present moment. Meditation is one way to do that, but so is working on a project you care about, writing a script for a video, solving a puzzle, going for a run, or getting lost in a hobby. When you're in the zone, time disappears. Past and future don't matter. You're fully grounded in the now. And in those moments, whether you're rich, poor, healthy, or dealing with challenges, happiness flows in naturally. Not because you forced it, not because you bought it, but because it's the byproduct of living fully in the present. So here's the takeaway. Don't try to be happy. Do the things you love. Be in the moment. Act, create, live, and when you do, happiness will find its way to you quietly, steadily, like a river flowing through your life. So let's keep digging deeper into this whole idea of happiness. Because if it's not just about money, love, food, or material stuff, then where does it actually come from? Here is something interesting. Happiness doesn't just depend on what happens to you. It has a lot to do with how you interpret what happens to you. In other words, your mindset, your perspective, and the meaning you attach to events play a huge role. Think about it. Two people can go through the exact same situation, and one of them might spiral into frustration, while the other finds a sense of peace or even gratitude. Same event, totally different emotional outcome. That tells us that happiness isn't only external, it's deeply internal. And this is where psychology gives us some valuable insight. There's this concept called the hedonic treadmill. Basically, it says that no matter what happens, whether you win the lottery or face a huge setback, you eventually return to a baseline level of happiness. You might shoot up when something amazing happens, or drop down when something painful happens, but over time, you adjust and come back to your natural set point. That's why buying the latest gadget or taking an exotic trip feels amazing at first, but eventually becomes your new normal. You adapt. The same thing happens when life throws you a challenge. You suffer at first, but most people find a way to adjust, rebuild, and carry on. So if we're all just circling back to this baseline level of happiness, does that mean we're stuck? Not necessarily. It means that chasing happiness through external stuff isn't the most effective strategy. Instead, it's about shaping the internal world, your thoughts, your actions, your perspective, because those are what influence where your baseline sits. Let me share another personal realization. For a long time, I thought happiness was this destination. Like once I achieve this goal, then I'll finally be happy. I put all my energy into chasing after that next milestone. And sure, when I reached it, I felt good. For a little while, but soon, that good feeling faded, and I found myself chasing the next thing. It was like running on a treadmill. You move a lot, but you're not really going anywhere, and I think that's how a lot of us live. We're constantly telling ourselves, I'll be happy when I get that promotion, when I find the right partner, when I hit a certain number in the bank account, when I live in that dream house. But once we arrive at those milestones, the happiness doesn't stick. The target just moves further down the road. Here's the tough truth. Happiness isn't at the destination. It's in the journey. It's in the small, everyday actions where you lose yourself in the moment. Think about the times when you've been fully absorbed in something you love. Maybe you were painting, writing, running, coding, cooking, or just deep in conversation with someone who lights you up. In those moments, you weren't chasing happiness. You weren't even thinking about it. You were just doing. And that's when happiness quietly showed up. This state has a name, flow. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi described it as the state of being completely immersed in an activity where time seems to disappear. You're not worried about the past, you're not anxious about the future, you're simply present. And in that presence, happiness emerges naturally. It's no coincidence that athletes talk about being in the zone, artists describe getting lost in their craft, and writers feel like the words are pouring through them instead of being forced. That's flow. And flow is one of the closest things we have to a recipe for real, lasting happiness. So instead of asking, how do I get happy? Maybe the better question is, what activities put me in flow? Here's where things get practical. You don't need to sit on a mountaintop or meditate for hours to find happiness, though meditation helps. You just need to identify the things that make you lose track of time in a good way, and then make those a bigger part of your life. For me, one of those things is creating content, writing scripts, recording videos, editing stories. When I'm deep in the process, I forget to check my phone. I don't notice the hours passing, and I'm just fully present. And you know what? That's when I feel happiest, not because I'm forcing myself to be happy, but because happiness is sneaking in as a side effect of doing what I love. And this brings us to another powerful point. Happiness isn't just about pleasure, it's also about meaning. Pleasure is temporary, but meaning sticks around. Let me explain. Eating a delicious meal? That's pleasure. But building a relationship with someone you care about, raising a family, contributing to a project, or helping others, that's meaning. Pleasure fades quickly, but meaning creates a deeper sense of satisfaction that lasts. In fact, research shows that people who feel their lives have meaning report higher overall happiness even if they are going through challenges, because meaning gives context. It helps you see pain as part of a bigger picture instead of just random suffering. So maybe happiness isn't something we should chase directly. Maybe it's something that comes as a byproduct of two things: being present and living with meaning. When you're present, you're not stuck in regrets about the past or fears about the future. You're here, now, fully alive. And when you live with meaning, you're aligning your actions with something bigger than yourself. Put those together, and happiness shows up naturally. Now, let's circle back to the idea of chasing happiness through stuff, money, success, possessions. There's a fascinating paradox here. Studies consistently show that beyond a certain point, more money doesn't equal more happiness. Of course, if you're struggling to meet your basic needs, food, shelter, safety, then money absolutely matters. But once those needs are met, the extra income doesn't dramatically improve happiness levels. Why? Because happiness isn't about what you have, it's about what you do and how you experience life. Think about the last time you bought something new that you were really excited about. Maybe it was a phone, a watch, or a pair of shoes. At first it felt amazing. You couldn't stop looking at it, using it, showing it off. But give it a few weeks, and it becomes just another part of your life. The excitement fades. That's hedonic adaptation at work again. But contrast that with an experience like going on a hike, spending time with loved ones, or creating something from scratch. Those experiences stick with you longer, and often, they become part of the stories you tell, the memories you treasure. So maybe the smarter way to think about happiness isn't to see it as a goal, but as a side effect of living fully through flow, through meaning, through presence, through experiences rather than things. And that's the shift that changed everything for me. I stopped asking, how do I get happy? And started asking, what do I love doing? And how can I do more of it? Because here's the secret. When you stop chasing happiness, and start building a life around what lights you up, happiness isn't something you need to hunt down anymore. It just shows up steady, quiet, and surprisingly consistent. So now that we've broken down what happiness is and, maybe more importantly, what it isn't, let's talk about how to actually apply all this in real life. Because understanding happiness on a theoretical level is one thing, but living it every day is another. Here's the first big idea. Stop treating happiness like a finish line you're rerunning toward. It's not a trophy waiting at the end of the race. Happiness is more like a companion that shows up while you're running, as long as you're focused on the run itself. That means instead of obsessing over, how can I be happy? Try asking, what actions bring me energy? What activities make me lose track of time? What choices align with my values? When you focus on those, happiness sneaks in quietly, almost as if by accident. Take work, for example. A lot of people think work and happiness don't go together. Work is often seen as something you just get through so you can enjoy your time off. But that doesn't have to be the case. When you find meaning in your work core, when your work puts you into a flow state, it becomes more than just a paycheck. It becomes part of your happiness recipe. Now, not everyone has their dream job, and that's okay. The point isn't that every second of your career has to feel blissful. The point is that you can choose to bring presence, curiosity, and meaning into whatever you're doing. Even small shifts like focusing on learning, connecting with coworkers, or taking pride in the details can transform how work feels. And outside of work, there are endless opportunities to cultivate happiness through simple actions. Things like moving your body, spending time outdoors, laughing with friends, learning something new, or creating something with your hands. None of these require massive amounts of money or extraordinary life circumstances. They just require being intentional and present. Another powerful factor in happiness. Gratitude. I know, it sounds cliché, but gratitude isn't just a motivational poster or a feel-good idea. As a scientifically proven happiness booster, when you take time to acknowledge what's good in your life, your brain literally rewires itself to notice more positives. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Start with the basics. The fact that you woke up today, that you have food to eat, that you have someone who cares about you, or even that the sun came out after a rainy week. Gratitude shifts your focus from what's missing to what's already here, and that shift alone can increase your baseline happiness. There's also the social piece. Humans are wired for connection. Countless studies show that strong relationships are one of the most consistent predictors of happiness. That doesn't mean you need 100 friends or a perfect family, it just means that genuine connection matters. Talking, sharing, listening, laughing, those simple interactions often bring more happiness than any material possession ever could. And here's something worth reflecting on. Happiness grows when you give it away. Doing something kind for someone else doesn't just help them, it also boosts your own sense of well-being. It's like happiness is contagious, spreading from one person to another. So if you want more happiness in your own life, one of the simplest ways to find it is to help create it for someone else. Now, let's bring it back to the idea of pleasure versus meaning. It's not that pleasure is bad, it's great, and we all need it. But pleasure is fleeting, while meaning runs deep. The key isn't to eliminate pleasure, but to balance it with purpose. Think about it like this. Eating your favorite dessert gives you pleasure, but contributing to a project you're passionate about gives you meaning. Watching a funny show gives you pleasure, but teaching someone a skill you've mastered gives you meaning. Both have value, but if you build your life only on quick pleasures, it's like eating candy for every meal. Sweet at first, but not nourishing in the long run. And here's the interesting twist. When you focus on meaning, you often end up with more pleasure too, because purpose-driven actions tend to create joy as a byproduct. So if we put all of this together, happiness becomes less of a mystery. It's not about chasing external rewards. It's not about arriving at some perfect future moment. It's about showing up for the present, engaging fully with what matters, cultivating gratitude, connecting with others, and doing things that align with who you are. That's why meditation and mindfulness are so often connected to happiness. Not because you have to sit cross-legged for hours, but because those practices train you to be here. And when you're here, happiness has room to breathe. Think back to what we said earlier. Happiness is like water. You can shake it with pleasure, stir it with pain, but eventually, it settles back into calmness. The trick isn't to control the water, it's to let it settle. So, let me leave you with a few practical reminders you can carry into your own life. Stop chasing, start doing. Happiness isn't something you hunt down at something that happens when you re-engaged in life. Find your flow. Identify the activities that make you lose track of time and prioritize them. That's where happiness lives. Seek meaning, not just pleasure. Quick highs fade fast, but meaningful actions build long-term satisfaction. Practice gratitude. A simple daily habit of noticing what's good can shift your whole perspective. Nurture relationships. Invest in the people who matter. Connection is one of the strongest happiness drivers. Be present, whether through meditation, mindfulness, or just slowing down. Happiness grows in the now, not in the someday. When you put these pieces together, happiness stops being this elusive, mysterious thing. It becomes a natural part of life, not constant, not permanent, but steady enough to carry you through both highs and lows. Because here's the final secret. Happiness was never about getting to a place where nothing goes wrong. Life will always have challenges, setbacks, and moments of pain. But happiness is about how you navigate those moments, how you ground yourself in meaning, and how you allow joy to flow through the cracks. So maybe happiness isn't a destination. Maybe it's a way of traveling. And once you realize that, the chase ends and the living begins. Thank you for being here, for reflecting on this with me, and for taking the time to think about what happiness really means. If this gave you something to think about, share it with someone you care about, because sometimes, passing on a little perspective can be the spark that brightens someone else's day. And at the end of it all, remember this. Don't just think about happiness. Don't just dream about it. Live, do, be, and happiness will follow.